had this idea to walk backwards every day for 40 days in a row here in July, August, and a little bit of September 2024. I used to walk backwards almost every single day since the pandemic for several years. And what's going to happen is every single day I'm going to record my thoughts and feelings that's going on for me in real time about the creative process or whatever else comes up for these 40 days. And you're going to hear, maybe 5 to 7 minutes per day of the best of recorded during that live walking backwards for about a quarter to a half of a mile per day. And it's in real time. So I'm really walking backwards as I'm talking with you outside. So enjoy the whole episode, and here we go.
So here we are at day 5, July 31st, 2024. Another beautiful day. I really like the hills in front of me. So there's this thing about awareness, which is a good portion of what I'm doing here every morning walking backwards, which is to expand my awareness and to notice what I don't notice, to see what I don't see, to feel what I don't feel, expanding the range and the depth. And there's two things that come to mind right now, which is awareness is unlimited and listening has no limitation. The depth of listening is quite large. And today's Wednesday, and I just noticed I passed the water truck. And if you ever look at my blog a long time ago, I wrote a blog called The Man Who Waters Trees. And it's about this guy who goes around Beverly Hills and other areas, literally watering trees that need to be watered because there's no irrigation system. They need to be kept. And I just passed the truck that does that. And it's a Wednesday, which is the day he was here. And it's no longer the same guy. And because the truck was parked in a certain way and he had cones out, these sort of hazard cones, it indicated to me that it wasn't the same person, because the guy that I knew, he was very maverick. He didn't need to have the regulation stuff done. He'd been doing it for 35, 40 years, something ridiculous. So that dovetails into, it doesn't really make a difference if you've been doing something for a month or years or decades. It's how you show up. It's how I engage. And that engagement is somewhat based on nature and really specifically based on intention. To have the desire, to have the interest, to keep noticing, to keep alive. And in one way you could say the relationship. So the relationship between myself and myself, and the relationship between myself and others. So I'm going to go a whole nother direction now and talk about how I passed a sign today that I must have passed so many times. And I saw it with fresh eyes today. And that is a sign that says artistic laundry. And it looks like it's been there since, I don't know, the 50s or the 60s. I mean, it's really, really an old school looking sign. And if anyone said to me, the place that does artistic laundry, I would have no idea who you're talking about. I might have seen that sign, but never really saw it. And I could have done that in one day, or I could have done that in 10 years. So it really isn't time dependent. It's really about my ability to be present, aware, and listening. And when I say listen, I don't mean just with the ears. I mean being aware, being present with what is on all levels. Remember a couple of days ago, I was talking about how these condo buildings here have these beautiful balconies that I'm sure when someone either rented them or bought them or whatever, people were like, oh, look at these beautiful balconies, overlooks trees, and I've yet to see anyone stand on it. What keeps us from that? Noticing. It's just a noticing. So let me ask you that. What keeps you from noticing? What's the obstacle? What gets in the way? A guy just walked by me right now and I noticed that he had a watch on his left arm. Maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago I wouldn't have noticed the watch, because a watch would have been so commonplace at that time. And now watches are the anomaly. There's another saying that says notice, and then notice what you notice. It's not enough to notice something. It needs to register. It needs to make an imprint. Notice that you notice. And then drawing it into the creative world, not only that I notice that I notice, I also need to make that something that, if I want to, I can work with in my narrative. I can work with in my creative project. I can now reference. It's It's like when you go to the library, and let's say this one particular library had 100,000 books. And in order for that to be of help to you, there's some organizational tool, language, coding system, whatever it is, that people have agreed to use in the world of libraries so that you can go to the librarian and find not only the title but the corresponding reference number, which then takes you to a shelf, hopefully, to find your book. Because if you didn't, and you went to a library that had 100,000 books, and you went to the librarian and you said, "Do you have this book?" And they said, "Absolutely." And they said, "Great, where is it?" And they pointed you towards the endless rows of books and said, "It is here. Our records indicate that it hasn't been checked out, so that means it must be somewhere in our library." So we're the same way. We need to have not only the book or the noticing, but we also need to have the ability to pull it up, to find it, so that we can work with it. And it doesn't need to be so logical, linear, like the Dewey system or the decimal system. It does need to be something that you can reliably go to and pull up what you need. And this is an unexpected turn for me, just so you know, which is, other than all the things we just talked about, noticing that you notice, awareness, listening, being present, all those things, the most reliable tool and technique for bringing something up for a human being in the moment is mental and physical relaxation and energy at the same time. It's this beautiful thing that we do as human beings, which is we keep an expanded state of consciousness. At the same time, it's also focused on what it is that we want to remember or pull up or create. And that's really exciting. So that leads us back to that state of being, a relaxation response, if you will. And at the same time, I have energy and focus. I do want to mention that this is something that is to be done in an upright position, either standing or sitting up or reclined, if you will, but not lying down. Lying down puts us in a different state, different than what's required of the artist, of the creative. And so when we lie down, we usually go to sleep. When we're sitting up or standing up, we tend not to be asleep in that common way. And that's why it's so important to train yourself or develop yourself, that when you're in a certain state of being that's very specific to the creative, that you are ready, available for the creative spark to happen. That's a wrap for today. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for a lovely time. I'm greeted by the smell of these beautiful eucalyptus trees. The sunlight is coming just above the horizon where it illuminates the mountains, and it's day 6. It's August 1st. And what's coming up right now is that breathing is always with me. It's something I'll always do. And on the other side of that is that throughout the day, throughout the weeks, the months, the years, I'm not the same person. And if I go into the microcosm of one day, and as I feel what I'm feeling right now, and the sweetness and the serenity, my breathing pattern, that spaciousness I feel right now, it's all just as it is. And some would say it would reflect in my character. It would reflect in my behavior. In other words, I'm not the same person right now than I will be in some kind of interaction later today with people I work with people I meet at the stores. And so not only does place, where I am, who I'm with, what time of day, time of season, all of that impacts how I'm going to comport, how I'm going to take in the world, and how I'm going to express. And anyone involved in storytelling, this is a key aspect to include in your material, in what you're creating. While it would be more pertinent to people who are doing long-form narrative, transformational stories, it's just pertinent to comedy sketches, because you want to include more of the character and give them more range instead of just this little tiny window. And that's kind of like what I'm doing right now. I'm walking backwards, talking with you to hopefully expand my level of awareness, to expand my level of self-expression, to expand my perception. And we all do that in our own way. We all go from more expansive to less expansive. Said another way, we all go from expansion to contraction. Because in the expansion tells us more about the person, in the contraction tells us more about the person. And now I'm going to go and share it the other way. The other way of sharing this is, imagine that you were trying to get to know someone romantically. Imagine you were dating someone. But the only time that you ever got together was at dinner time, and you only spent 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. together. And you did this 4 or 5 times a week for months. At a certain point, if everything was going great and you really enjoyed each other, at a certain point you'd go like, hey, couldn't we have lunch? Couldn't we go on a long weekend? You want to have more experiences, not just for the experience sake, but so that you can get to know this person more. Because intuitively, innately, we know that people are different at different times of the day, in different environments, different people. We know that if you control the environment in a certain way, you won't really get to know the person. That's why they say if you want to get to know a person, travel with them. Because there's no hiding. You're together. When you're traveling, it's even more complex because there's more moving parts, more opportunities for expansion and contraction. I want to also share that I'm passing the same area that I passed a little while ago walking, and I'm noticing how different I feel right now in relationship to how I felt when I passed the same spot a few minutes ago. So even within a very short period of time, there's change, alteration, even though the time of day is about the same. Place is about the same. When we have these conversations, it's usually around sunrise, plus or minus. My level of awakeness shifts. I don't know if I've shared this before, but one of my core intentions for these 40 days is to be walking backwards within the first 10-15 minutes of being awake, and go to the area where I walk backwards. I can do all that and I still don't have to wake up. So yeah, something to consider when you're working on your projects. And when I say projects, I also include yourself when you're working on yourself. I must say, I'm already looking forward to tomorrow, and it's always a fun discovery to see where our conversation goes. Today is August 2nd already, which is day 7. 40 days goes by real fast. Today I wanted to share about what happens between here and here, you know? Life is a continual flow, and in reality there is no stopping, no starting. It's all just different phases happening and transitions happening. And so with that, I touch a button and I'm recording, and I touch another button and I'm not recording. But that's illusory because I'm always recording. It's just a matter of what's recording, because something else is operating. If this kind of recording device isn't happening, there's always another recording. In fact, if you look at it, people are little recording devices. Actually, some of the most sensitive recording devices, you know, in terms of like a speaker or a microphone, or because it amplifies certain things, diminishes other things, holds endless memory. They also record thoughts and feelings, and then that has a ripple effect far beyond any of us would care to recognize. Generational. So in terms of, there's that smell of the eucalyptus. What a beautiful smell. It's so much fun because I can smell it before I visually come in contact with it, and that's just such a delight. On the way here, when I was walking as one does to get to the place where I walk backwards, I was thinking about judgment, I was thinking about populating one's life, and what I'm feeling into right now is just being mindful of what I record, and then as I record it, which is another way of saying is as I go through my life, being aware of how I think and feel about it, and if it's not part of my ideal created life, that's an opportunity to make alterations. And I wouldn't say it's an examined life. That's not the intention here. The intention is more of an act of awareness, and then the ability to make choices based on your awareness. In the moment, I feel like for me, sometimes there's an awareness that's happening that's based on an old vision, an old hope and dream, and I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know if it's current or not. So right now I'm having the experience of a person who's walking on the other side of the street who's incredibly loud, and she has a different cadence to her voice, and the voice at the same time all of a sudden subdued. When I'm noticing something, I always have a choice of what I choose to focus on in that moment. Sometimes if there is something that's going on that feels off, it's good to give it focus. It's healthy because I need to make adjustments. I need to take care of what's in front of me. Other times, it really is a matter of focusing on what it is I want to focus on. I guess we could just say an intentional life. The next thought that came up, and it is a thought, is the demand, the hope that I make some kind of discovery. And maybe it's not about making discoveries. Maybe it's about or being entertaining or being insightful or anything of that nature. Maybe all of life is really about just being present with each other in every moment that I can be. Everything's being recorded all the time. If I take that perspective that everything is being recorded all the time, then this idea of being in performance is something that may not be as helpful as it possibly could be as a way of perceiving certain kinds of work. The skills and techniques that tennis players develop over years, they don't take with them into a business meeting or a lunch. They don't sit there and demonstrate how flexible they are with a lunge or how much cardiovascular shape they're in, etc. They just show up. Now, they have focus of attention because they can focus their energy and their physical energy and their mental energy to get a serve. They have focus to stay present in a volley so they can win the point. And those will cross over into your day-to-day life. And it's the same thing with the artist. There's passages that are recited that you've memorized. There is a very precise language skill, a very precise movement skill that you've honed, but it most likely won't show up in a day-to-day meeting or lunch with a friend. And in support of this thing we're talking about, that we're always being recorded. I mean, I'm always being recorded when I look at it from the perspective of all of life, but forever. It's being more prominent in our culture right now because we have surveillance cameras everywhere. Businesses, people having their own individual surveillance cameras. And then if I look at everybody who has a cell phone, they have a way of recording me. And then every human being, if I go pre-internet, pre-digital, every human being is a recording device. Every human being is recalling or remembering or recording. I'm just getting that right now. Is to repeat something, is to go over it, right? Like repeat. Chord is a way of chord, an attachment. What am I attached to? What have I recorded that I am attached to? And by the recording of it, by the re-tethering to it, if I take a recording, especially of a song, something with a rhythm, and I listen to it over and over and over, there's a part of me that records it at a very deep level. I'm sure we all either have done or know people who listen to one song or one album or one playlist for days in a row. There's something about that needs to be grooved, something that you're working out or working with. So when we are with people, we're constantly being recorded. And when we're in nature, we're being recorded by the wildlife. They talk about that in the music industry. They talk about that in all different kinds of ways of documentation. So I'd like you to work with that. What does the record show of your life right now? Without judgment, without making it a certain way. You can tell by what's populating your life, and then you have a choice to keep picking it up or to dropping it off. It's like if someone says, I can't stop eating certain kinds of food. I go, well, stop picking it up at the store, or stop picking it up through the drive-thru. So don't pick it up. If you don't pick it up, you can't eat it. That's a very sequential way of looking at it, and it doesn't have the nuance of complex human behavior behind it, but ultimately that's what it comes to. Just don't pick it up. Thank you. So today's Saturday, the 3rd of August, all the balconies are empty. A few of them have furniture plants that show some form of life. There's this one building that has cactus, and very long, tall cactus probably 15, 20 feet tall. And even though it's a vertical line that's going fairly straight up, it's still not straight. Next to a very modern building which has hard, very straight lines. I bring this up because I feel like when I work on creative projects, and when I say creative projects I also include the vision of our lives, that we tend to think of them in a very linear, logical, sequential way. And then, as the saying goes, man makes plans and God laughs. And the reality, the experience is other than that. And it's almost like we as a culture, as a human being, don't want to accept it because of our efforts to keep pushing for the assembly line model, if you will, as opposed to the meandering S-curve, the serpentine river. There's a very famous example of loggers wanting to float their log trees, the cut down trees, down the river, and they were tired of it being so slow because in a natural river there's always those S-curves, serpentine, and they were like, this is ridiculous, it has to do this S-curve back and forth, the switching. And they're like, what would be better if it could just go straight down the hill, none of this curving stuff. And so they built a trench that they thought would be the best, built for speed, and it was a very straight line going straight down the hill. And it worked until the very end. And at the very end, the logs would jam and it would create a backup, and it actually created more problems, and things ultimately were actually even slower. So they left that alone and went back to the S-curve of the natural rivers. So there is an element of nothing is as it seems. Nothing is 100% as it appears. And that's on both sides of the fence, both in the natural world and in the man-made world. I feel that's why people in the creative world, people instinctually always go for going into nature for rest and rejuvenation, reset. It's because it's the natural world, and that we get away from these hard, made-up, unnatural lines visually, but also how it feels when we perceive them, and we get back into those natural rhythms. And we get back in relationship to the elements. Most of the time when people go on holiday, most of the time people are attracted to going to places with large bodies of water, be it the ocean or a lake or a stream. And it may look like water sports, but because people do it all over the world, beyond culture, it's other things play out as well. The negative ions from the water, the natural element of being around water element. So there's this thing of being left to our own devices, allowing ourselves to distill, going back to distill, and how important that is. There's this element of freshness and aliveness that's coming, and maybe that's something that's inherent to what I'm experiencing right now, which is I'm more than halfway through our summer season going into fall. I'm tapping into this element of the southern hemisphere, which is going into spring. But whatever it is, I feel like tapping into freshness, aliveness, presence is so important. And it's a situation where it's only going to be this way for now, and it can feel like forever, especially if we're experiencing some sort of emotional life that we don't prefer or that's contracting in nature. But everything changes, and yes, we have seasons where there's a sort of a expectation for a certain kind of thing to happen, but within every season there's change, and it's constantly different. And without one season happening, the next season couldn't. Vivaldi's Four Seasons. We can't have spring without winter. We can't have summer without spring. And every summer has to be followed by a fall. You have to have it, otherwise the summer would continue and everything would fry and there would be no harvest. So let's really keep that in mind as we go forward here, especially when we are considering our creative cycles and living in balance in that adage of create, release, relax. Create something, release it into the world in some way, and then relax. So you have springtime, which is a lot of creation. You have summertime, which is a part of creation, which is more growth. And you have the time when it's harvest season, where you gather it and you share it, you release it. And then there's the winter where you relax.